Welcome back, everyone. I'm Imge Sabanci. A management scholar at IE Business School and proud one of the organizers of the Global Forum. Befitting the being global, our panel is multilingual, so please don't forget to select your preferred language if you haven't done so. You can do it from the Translations tab in the column on the right of your screen and click Mute All button to only hear the interpreter and not have overlapping voices. Okay, enough with housekeeping issues, so let's move on with our exciting panel. I'm delighted to chair this roundtable on the principle of democratizing work, and so happy to be together with three inspirational speakers today. Please join me in welcoming Arzu Çerkezoğlu, Elizabeth Anderson, and Iñigo Albizuri Landazabal.
Arzu Çerkezoğlu has been an activist of social rights and human rights, and she is a medical doctor. And she is the president of the health workers and also the president of the Confederation of Progressive Lawyers, Progressive Workers Confederation. She is the first president of the Confederation, and she is also a member of the ETUC board. And I'm very proud to share this platform with you. Welcome.
Elizabeth Anderson is a philosopher and a distinguished professor of philosophy and women's studies at the University of Michigan. Her research focuses on moral, social, and political philosophy, democratic theory, feminist theory, and the philosophy of economics and social sciences. She is currently writing a book on the history of Protestant work ethic, highlighting the neglected branch of its development that stresses the need for institutional arrangements that promote workers' autonomy and dignity. She is also the author of Value and Ethics in Economics, The Imperative of Integration, and most recently, Private Government, How Employers Rule Our Lives and Why We Don't Talk About It. Elizabeth, today it is time to talk about it, and we are honored to have you with us. Iñigo Albizuri Landazabal is the global head of public affairs at Mondragon Corporation in the Basque Country of Spain and the president of Mundikide, the NGO of Mondragon Cooperatives for economic development of poor communities. He is also the president of International Organization of Industrial and Service Cooperatives, comprised of 49 members with 65,000 enterprises employing more than 4 million people across the world. Iñigo, it is wonderful to have you with us. So as you see, we have an amazing panel of speakers with diverse backgrounds and perspectives. I know you will have a lot of questions, and we aim to answer them. Please write your questions in the Q&A section during our conversation, and we will try to answer as many of them as possible as the time allows. Please do not forget to add to whom you're addressing the question. Okay, without further ado, let's start with your own views on democratizing work.
Arzu, last year when we published the manifest, workplace democratization when we published. So which one is more feasible and which one is your priority? Of course, before you address, I would like to make a small reminder. Given the fact that there are participants and audience from all continents, I kindly ask you to speak a little bit slow so that our interpreters can easily work and interpret your words in the right way. Hello everyone and good evening. First of all, I would like to welcome everyone, and also I would like to thank the organizing committee on behalf of my confederation, DISC, which is the Confederation of Revolutionary Workers Trade Unions. As regards to the manifesto, there are three principles, and these are complementing each other, and there is a consistency as regards to these elements. In this respect, these three principles should be taken in harmony and together. Of course, as a representative of the trade union, as a worker, and as an activist, to me, the workplace of these issues and democratization is very important, and there is need for an urgent action, and we should be more efficient and effective. I would like to elaborate some of these issues to reflect my confederation's views and also to respond what is happening here in Turkey and at the global level. First of all, as we know that there are key barriers and obstacles to human rights and workers' rights. And the first one is the concentration of the political power, which is a global issue, which we observe in all over the world as a result of the concentration of activities. And we know that as a result of this concentration, there is we can say that there is no social democracy, and we have more authoritarian and repressive policies. The second barrier is the concentration of the finance and also repression of the capital. As a result, we see that the right to work and also freedoms and rights of workers are violated and are under threat and are threatened. As we know that COVID-19 has made the function and the essential function of the labor and work more visible, because the COVID-19 unveiled the invisibility and the cover of the labor. But we know that companies, the capitalists, still try to make decisions as alone without consulting them. We are observing that there are monolateral decisions, and there are serious obstacles to workers so that they can take part in decision-making bodies, because there are numerous rights which are under the protection of international conventions and international instruments, but workers are unable to exercise most of these rights. Despite the conventions, despite these guarantees, we are unable to use these rights, and we know that the international reports, for example, the reports by the ITUC, indicate that there are deteriorations in our rights. What we know that in many countries, including some big companies, we know that people are not benefiting from social security, and they face some problems in terms of the income, and they face some problems. And in all these periods, historically, the workplace and the work relations, in order to democratize these workplaces, the key solution to this democratization, to achieve democratization, is organizing workers, and namely trade unions. When they join the trade union, we know that throughout the 200 years period, trade unions are the key tool to achieve democratizations, because workers gain more space when they join a trade union, and they protect their rights at workplaces, and they can democratize the workplaces, and also they can promote the human aspect of their workplaces. in fact, these issues, the trade unions, are the key weapon that we have to fight against the arbitrariness of the companies. And we have social dialogue committees, and we have international conventions to protect our rights, and especially after the Second World War, the welfare state practices. But when we look at the last 40 years, last 4 decades, all these rights and the relation between the capital and labor, unfortunately, is not used effectively, and there is a unilateral relations, and there is an attempt to reshape these relations from one side and from an unbalanced perspective, especially during the last quarter of the 20th century. As a result, what we know that following the COVID-19, the situation has worsened, and all these debates are important because we have participants from different countries, and we have so many participants from so many countries, and all these debates are very, very important for us. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Arzu, for the first question.
Elizabeth, I really want to ask your view on that right now. As a philosopher and as a scholar doing research on democratic theory, which part resonated with you the most in the manifesto, and why?
I see a very deep interaction between decommodification and democratization. Human labor is not a commodity because people cannot walk away from their own labor as they can from the products of their labor. The reduction of labor to a commodity amounts to the reduction of human beings to mere instruments whose interests, welfare, and autonomy can be disregarded by their employers.
Elizabeth, I'm very sorry to interrupt. May I kindly ask you to turn the auto volume off in the interpretation translation tab?
How do I do that? I see. Oh.
Thank you.
Democratizing the workplace, which means empowering workers to have a voice in how they deploy their own labor and in the conditions of work, is critical for the decommodification of labor and hence of human beings themselves. The productive firm in most countries is organized as a private government, by which I mean a government that is unaccountable to the governed, that is, to the workers themselves. The constitution of most firms across the world is a dictatorship. You have the executives who issue orders to the workers, and the workers don't have a voice in what the content of those orders are, and for the most part have no rights of appeal unless they're represented by a labor union or have some kind of co-determination within the firm. So the constitution of the typical firm is a dictatorship. Well, nobody thinks that dictatorship is an appropriate way to rule a state, because whenever that happens, the country is ruled in the interests and for the power and security of just a tiny few, and most people are excluded. Their interests and viewpoints are excluded. If dictatorship is unacceptable for state governments, why should it be acceptable for corporate governments? In both cases, dictatorship means that most people are going to be left out. For this reason, I think the democratization of the firm is absolutely critical, and democratization and decommodification go hand in hand.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I want to turn to Iñigo right now at this point. So what's your view on that, Iñigo? So as one of the top leaders of an organization emphasizing and using democratic methods in its corporate governance, because Elizabeth just mentioned about how constitution of a typical firm is dictatorship, and you are specifically emphasizing the democratic methods in your corporate governance and creating employment for more than 80,000 people. So which part of the manifesto is more relevant?
Así que bueno,
to you
repito la
and why?
pregunta.
We
¿Qué
really
parte del
want to
manifiesto
learn that.
es más?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to me to share this approach and this roundtable, and just being surrounded by women, I think, is extremely positive. So thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to tell you, well, welcome to the cooperative, which is the democratic world. Well, Elizabeth was mentioning that there is a parallelism with government. We're not talking about dictatorship, but cooperatives are democracy. What I love the manifest because I felt it's simple, it's concrete, it deals with very important issues, and it has a nice conclusion. It's telling us basically that not everything is negative because there are systems in place that show us that there is another way, social economy and cooperativism. As you mentioned in the presentation, Mondragon is a well-known group in the Basque country. It's the largest industrial cooperative in the world. But as a president of CICOPA, including 4 million workers, it could be a whole country, we are all governed by the same democratic norms or rules that give us the possibility of working in a cooperative. The professor at the beginning, and also Arzu and Elizabeth, have mentioned the character of the capital. The key of a workers' cooperative is the subordination of the capital to the work. So basically, the capital is a means, it's not an end in itself. And the key here is that. But the cooperatives, they are not exactly the model that we learn in schools. It's not the model that the laws promote, and are the exception. And that's why what I loved from the manifest was that so many people, university professors around the world, could actually see that light of hope in models that are like 150 years old. ATHI, last year, the ATHI celebrated its 125th anniversary. So we're not talking about something new, but the power is held by great corporations that are capitalist, and the only end is to maximize benefit, and any other activity that is competitive or skilled in the hands of the workers tends to be relegated outside of the official discourse. So I believe this is an extremely interesting debate, and I'm very happy to be here with you. Thank you very much. So Arzu, I'd like
So what are the main challenges, and if there is any opportunities to achieve it? Of course, we talked about the general framework of this declaration, and we also know that it is very important to define the challenges. As I said, the neoliberalism is in force 40 years and it affects the whole world. And also we know that it makes an impact on politics and also on workplaces, and democracy was weakened as a result of the concentration of the power, and also increasing authoritarianism neglects and violate democracy and human rights. But there is a company-oriented approach which aims to maximize its profit. That means it is the key barrier to society, to nature, and this commodification policies, which of course are the basis of neoliberal financial system, is commodifying everything. As we know that social inequalities were deepened in this period, and we know that there is also a decrease in the level of the trade unions and also unionized workers. Social security, right to health, unfortunately, were open to markets, and social security systems and also welfare systems were also marketized, and public services were privatized at a considerable level, and also there is a decrease at a considerable level in public employment. And we know that deregulation in employment, while there is this liberalization of the international and foreign trades, we ask that there is need for social requirements. Unfortunately, these requirements and these demands were not considered, and companies moved to countries where labor is cheap, where there is no trade unions, and where the trade union movement is weak. As a result, our rights and workers' rights were weakened, were deteriorated. As a result, the inequality between income and also welfare is deepened. What I mean, both in our country and in all over the world, we observe that authoritarian political regimes and also neoliberal financial systems are the key and serious obstacle to democratization at workplaces. On the basis of this fact, in order to democratize workplace and professional life, it is time to change the neoliberal financial policies, because it is crystal clear that this system is not sustainable, and democracy should be taken and should be expanded to workers' life and professional life, because democratization is not important for only political life. What we know that the 40 years reign of the neoliberalism is about to end. As the ITUC, which is our international confederation, underlines, it is important to focus on democratization in workplaces, and it is time for a new social contract. And there is need for a new social contract. And having such a social contract, which is based on equality, justice, peace, fraternity, will be the basis of the new social system. And I think there are many points that are in harmony with the manifesto that you just mentioned.
I'm unmuting myself. I'm very sorry about that. I thought I did it, but I didn't.
Thanks a lot, Arzu. And it is great to hear that there are similarities between the new social contract and also the manifesto. And you refer to equality, justice, peace, which are important for us as well. And these are key principles. And these are the reasons why we decided to organize this.
So, Elizabeth, now I would like to turn to you again and ask how you see that. So, what are the main challenges today that stand in the way of fulfilling the aspirations for democratizing work? And what are the opportunities as well, according to you?
So, the entire question, I think you're asking the opportunities, work. Is that correct?
I couldn't understand you clearly.
Yes, I was not hearing you.
So, can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yes, sorry, I just can't hear you. I'm going to speak. The challenge is regarding.
We cannot hear you. Or is it only me? Can you hear Elizabeth?
Challenges, I think.
Iñigo, Arzu,
Number one.
Can you give me thumbs up? No.
I can't
Elizabeth,
hear you.
we cannot hear you. You are not on mute, but we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me? Is it possible for you to hear me?
I'll just now go to Iñigo with the same question. And in the meantime, can you just try to unmute and try it, because we cannot hear you at all.
Okay.
There might be something that can be done in sound checks. Can someone intervene in the meanwhile while Iñigo answering the same question? So Iñigo, I want to ask you the same question. So challenges against
can you hear me?
Opportunities for democratizing work in a, like, if you think similarly with Arzu, or how you see that? Any other
Can you hear me, or are we all lost in?
You're on mute.
Well, thank you, first of all. I think that, as a matter of fact, there is opportunity and there are difficulties. The opportunities, I see them from the change in the way of thinking. There's a consciousness that is being created, which is more critic towards what the workplace is and what taking care of the planet means, especially with young people, because they will inherit that planet, and the planet cannot continue to be like that, and that's continuing. But the challenge is very big, and the change is even greater. In my opinion, Arzu, you said this previously, I think we come from a culture which is particular, which is very antica. We come from a culture of the 19th century, and the model of enterprise is also from that century. It's not to maximize the benefits, it's to use workers as if there were a medium, a commodity, to use the planet as a commodity that never ends. It's that mentality that needs to be changed, and for that, we need to begin with the education. That means we need to teach our students that cooperation is a possible method. And here I emphasize that the cooperative model is something real. But we can't demand a student that has been formed in a university, like a business faculty, where all you seek is win at no cost, to change his point of view all of a sudden and be conscious. That's not going to happen. It's the same as if we taught them to tell them that men are better than women. There will be consequences. And I think that's absolutely key in the education. We need to educate, and that's going to affect the model. And that's what we do at Mondragon. If we don't do this from the beginning, then this will be practically impossible to change in the future because of the structures. And I will emphasize also in the issues of something talked previously here, negotiation. We come from the 19th century, and there was a lot of improvements thanks to the trade unions. But we would like from the cooperative movements to be more involved in the social dialogue, because we are 10% of the economy of Europe. And in no country we have been included in the social dialogue, because we are owners for the trade unions, but we are workers for the government. We need to go to a new world to work with new rules and new methods, new ways of thinking. So the answer will be, we're getting there. In Europe, everybody sees Eastern Europe like a way to fall because the taxes are extremely high. And with that, they balance the differences, social differences. But that's accepting that there has to be equality or inequality, when it's more logic to have an equitable share. And that suppose for us that there's a payroll distribution from 1 to 7. That's impossible to put in the head of a Northern American that comes from a corporate structure, to make them think that this retributive system can work. But it does work, and it's effective. The thing is that we have to be accounted for a shared distribution, which is different, that there are different methods to reach the same goals. And as Arzu said, the capital has been moving in function in regards to the labor hours. And we look at places where the legislations allowed certain things. The good thing is that now we have a global conscious, and we can create forums such as this one where we can share experiences from different countries. That's the opportunity we have. And overall, the opportunity is in the young people. If we really teach them that there's a different way to do things, that's the solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Iñigo. So I also agree with your comments, and we know that, like, as business school, so I'm from a business school as well, we need to shoulder our responsibility in this, and also we need to change the view that the goal is profit, right? This is not right anymore. It was not right actually in the past, and it is still not right, and we should shoulder our responsibility. And on the third day, Lisa is actually moderating a session on how to bring democracy in the business school curriculum. So if anyone is interested in that, you can follow that session as well. So Elizabeth, I want to turn back to you. I don't know if your the technical things will work now. So let's try, because we, like all the audience and we panelists, would love to listen to your views on that. No.
Okay.
I cannot hear you, but is it my, or can you hear Elizabeth? Anyone?
Can you hear me?
Elizabeth, can you speak again? I thought I would be catching you, but I cannot, so I don't know what to do right now. If someone is trying to solve the problem, maybe just refreshing, like closing the session, refreshing your browser and connecting again might work. And in the meanwhile, we can continue with the third question with Arzu and Iñigo, and we'll be waiting for you here. So if you just close the session, close your browser, open everything, we'll be waiting for you here enthusiastically.
Okay.
Thank you. So then, Iñigo, I want to continue again with you while we are waiting for Elizabeth. So I want to ask you, so how do you see the relationship between democratizing work and the other two principles that we will be discussing tomorrow and on Thursday? So decommodification and decarbonization. Are they compatible or sometimes come at the expense of each other? Any tensions, synergies you see? What would you like to say about that?
Yes, I think that democratizing the company, the enterprises, means having the rest of things. This means when decisions are taken by the employees, several things happen which are positive. One is that the solutions come from the community. Therefore, if the employers are the ones that make the decisions for the solutions, and what they do depends in the future of their children, automatically that's supposed to be taking care of the planet, taking care of their surroundings, things will be done. Normally, I give an example, and that is the ratio of accidents that we have in the corporation. In Mondragon, in some companies that we have, we are in the northern Spain, but our ratio of accidents in regards to our surroundings is cut by 50%. When we seek why is this, beyond the systems, I insist that this is because the people take care of themselves. If we democratize the enterprise, if we give the employees the possibility to decide, they will decide in favor of their own interest. This means their decisions will not be taken in account for, I don't know, like things said previously, like in a corporation which that has a head office miles away from where I live. From there, I won't be their priority. So democratizing, getting the company closer to the employees and to the surroundings. And therefore, there's a effect and relation formula here. That's the quality of the decisions done and the taking care of the surrounding we have, not only about the labor conditions, but also about the environment. So first, our philosophy in regards to the 2030 agenda, first of all, have a decent workplace. I think that's number 8. After that, this work is done in a democratic place, and the rest of the agenda will go by itself. People need a way of living, and that's work. That's why work is so important. And this is why the manifest is so important, for seeing the work not as a medium, but a way of achieving social rights. The cooperative associations has always had as a goal the social transformation, but this transformation is to improve. A way to integrate people is to provide them with a dignified workplace so they can have decent life. And the rest is all aligned with this. This is not only my opinion, but these are the facts, at least here. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. So, Elizabeth, you are back, and we are happy to have you back. So, can we give it a try?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, good. Okay.
I cannot hear. Can you hear her? If you can, okay. I'll change my source. Please go ahead.
All right. It's such a pleasure to be able to address you. I wanted to speak both to the challenges that we face in democratizing the workplace and also in what are the opportunities available to us. I think the number one challenge to democratizing the workplace is plutocracy, the role of the rich. Even in constitutionally democratic countries, it is the case that inequality is so high that the rich call the shots, especially in the United States and in other countries with extreme economic inequality. In addition, we've seen a decline of labor unions in many countries, and that is deeply connected to a generalized backsliding of democracies in many countries around the world. The ideology of shareholder wealth maximization has also taken over the executive suites of major corporations, and that has given them a rationale for ignoring the interests of other stakeholders besides the shareholders. This ignores the investments that workers make in developing firm-specific human capital, not to mention their human investment of their work, which happens not only in industries that might be thought to be inherently dangerous, such as mining, but with the pandemic, any kind of service or goods production that involves interaction, close face-to-face interaction with other people. So I think we have a collection of both institutional and ideological obstacles to democratizing the workplace. Nevertheless, we can also see opportunities. The central tool for promoting democratization in any sphere of life is the democratic social movement. Any kind of collective organization on behalf of democratic empowerment of groups that are currently disempowered, that is the critical tool. Of course, labor unions have long been at the forefront of such social movements. And importantly, they have, through experience, recognized that in order to successfully organize, they have to run a more inclusive kind of politics that listens to a variety of stakeholders in order to assemble a powerful enough movement and coalition to induce politicians to pass laws, enabling laws that enable them to have a greater voice in the workplace and beyond. So I see a deep interaction between the democratization of the workplace and strengthening democracy at the state level. And the critical mode by which these two kinds of democratization reinforce each other is the democratic social movement. We have to then organize and build solidarities of workers, and workers also with allied democratic movements to promote social justice along other lines of social identity besides class, including gender, of course, race, ethnicity, and so forth.
Elizabeth, please don't mute yourself because I want to continue with you as now everything is working. So I'll have my third question to you. And you just mentioned about race, gender equality. And actually, I would like to ask you, as a philosopher working on these issues, so race, gender, and equalities, how do you see the relationship between anti-democratic practices and the current situation of increasing inequalities? I'm also mentioning about the same issue in the chapter of the book I wrote. So, and there is an intrinsic connection deep connection between these two, anti-democratic practices and increasing inequalities. But I really want to learn about your view. And also, can you let us know, like, how can democratization be a remedy for reversing this infuriating and unacceptable trend?
Yes, that I think is the question of today that is of central importance, because much of the democratic backsliding that is taking place is actually organized around conflicts of social identities besides class. So conflicts over race, ethnicity, immigration status, sexual orientation, and so forth. All of these conflicts, sometimes they're called cultural or social identity conflicts beyond class. Why is that happening even as economic inequality is increasing? And I think the short answer to this is that for many workers, they have received a kind of social contract according to which they accept class inequality and class-based disempowerment in return for presumed privileges on these lines of other social identities, such as gender, especially, and race. At the same time, democratic social movements have been advancing the claims of subordinated groups that are subordinated on the basis of cultural and social identities, such as race, ethnicity, gender, and sexual orientation, and immigration status. Those movements are threatening the social contract by which what you might call majority or plurality identity groups within the democratic states have accepted a substantial degree of class subordination in return for cultural domination. They feel threatened by that and by these democratic social movements along other lines of social identity. And that is powering democratic backsliding and support for authoritarian regimes. They feel that, well, they've already lost out on class lines and now they insist on their compensation on cultural lines. I think that is a big, big problem. Of course, this whole way of thinking about politics is based on a kind of framing or representation of the stakes in terms of group positional competition, a kind of zero-sum game where the gain in status of groups long subordinated by race, gender, and so forth is represented to the dominant groups as a loss of status on their part. Whenever you have a zero-sum game about how politics works, democracy is going to be in big trouble. It can't flourish under a conception of politics under which gains for one group are necessarily losses to another group. Instead, we have to reframe the meaning of politics into positive sum games, whereby everyone's interests can be advanced, or the overwhelming majority of people's interests can be advanced through solidarity and cooperation. And that is exactly what workers' movements are trying to do. That we can all gain by democratizing the workplace, creating a system of democracy in which all workers can get better conditions, safer conditions, respect, dignity, and meaningful work. Those are interests everyone has that can only be secured through solidarity across lines of race and gender and so forth, because as long as different subgroups are divided, plutocracy wins. At the role of the rich, the role of corporate executives, and the role of shareholders at the expense of workers. So that's why I think we have to consistently point out and highlight the advantages to all workers of joining together. Everyone gains when workers have a voice in the workplace. But in order to achieve that, we have to work together across these other lines that are now represented as threatening to the historically dominant groups of workers in society.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. So we also see how important the solidarity is and being together and supportive, and that's why we are building on this movement. And on the last day, at the final session with Isabel and Helen, we will be discussing the future of the movement and how we can all stay in solidarity together. So, Arzu.
So, Arzu, I would like to return to you once again. As Elizabeth clearly stated, this issue is important, but I would like to get your opinion as well. Unfortunately, Turkey is a country that there is a continuous deterioration in gender equality, and as a woman leader who has connections with all segments of society, I wonder your opinion on anti-democratic situation and also its deep relations with the gender inequalities. So, your opinions, please. As you stated, Elizabeth also expressed her views well, either from political perspective or social life, or a workplace. If there is no democracy, we can firmly state that inequalities are deepened there. And it is same for social inequalities and gender inequalities, because anti-democratic practices and inequalities are feeding each other. We as women face inequalities in all aspects of life, and we are in a similar situation in workplaces, in professional life. We face more problems at workplaces, we get lower wages, and we have lesser opportunities to join trade unions. We are less visible in trade unions, especially the COVID-19 or other extraordinary periods or social crisis. Women are the first who is fired from job. Especially in the COVID-19, we know that our labor at work as well as at home become more invisible. And what we have seen in the COVID-19 is that all the discriminatory policies and practices were deepened during the COVID-19 because the gender inequalities is based on male dominant mentality and this capitalist patriarchal relations and mentality. In this neoliberal age, in this neoliberal period, these inequalities have become more visible and were deepened. In this respect, if we talk about democratization at workplaces, we should pay attention to inequalities, gender inequalities, and gender discrimination should be eliminated. We should focus on this. And in this respect, ILO recommendation, ILO conventions 100, 190, and 191, especially in this neoliberal age, I'm talking about these neoliberal policies and also authoritarian repressive regimes. are creating inequalities for women and deepen the gender inequalities. In this respect, the ILO Convention on Equal Wage and also Discrimination Convention, and also the sexual harassment and also gender-based violence materials and documents are very important for our struggle. I also would like to state that we are passing through a period that barriers are increasing, so that women are prevented from joining and taking part in decision-making process. And all these equalities are based on male-dominant capitalist relations, and the capitalist system deepened the relations. As a result, the women movement knows very well that it is time to build women solidarity, and it is the only way to eliminate the inequalities in the professional life. And we should increase our struggle, and we should work harder, we should struggle more, so that women will be more visible and should have more space, and the voice of women will be heard in a better way. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Arzu.
So thank you to all panelists for such thought-provoking discussion. So I'm sure audience is now looking forward to the Q&A session, although we are short on time. Let's don't make them wait more. So let me just go to the Q&A. So Wolfgang is asking, democratic firms are outsiders in the sea of economistic shareholder value. Share value thought forms reproduced in everyday work of duties. Okay, so I couldn't catch the question, but are you asking, Wolfgang, if this is the case? So just let me know. I'm just passing. Rebecca, I saw your question. So what skills can we promote everywhere and anywhere to help the masses welcome their responsibilities to have a voice in their democratic workplaces and any community spaces? So who would you like to take the question first? Rebecca, do you have someone that you address this question, or to all panelists? Anyone want to just take it? So the skills that we can promote to welcome responsibilities for, like, to welcome workers have a voice in the democratic workplaces.
I'd like to address that question. Historically, labor unions have been a critical source of workforce training and workforce development of skills, both narrowly productive skills, but also democratic skills. When people are empowered to have a voice, you have people who take an interest in that. Labor unions and co-determination, workplace councils have historically been places where people exercise and develop skills of democratic engagement in speaking out about the conditions of their work and how they would like that to change. So I think the development of labor unions, as well as, by the way, the reconstruction of corporate promotion ladders would be a positive development in terms of learning how to run a more democratic workplace.
Thank you. Arzu, would you like to take from there?
Can I something? Like, yeah, as Elizabeth said, and I also mentioned in my speech, for democratizing work and workplace, the most important thing in our hands is actually maybe the main tool is still the mobilization of the working class and our trade union. And of course, the trade unions should be a real trade union, a union that struggles for all the decision-making mechanisms to engage the workers with this decision-making mechanism is important. And of course, democracy is one of the most basic human rights, but in order to establish peace at workplace, of course they are important, but we are in a world where the trade unions are, the movement is getting a bit weaker. And yesterday, for example, in a garment trade union, in a garment company, the boss of the textile company has closed the factory because the unionization of the workers were getting higher. And next, another example, 140 workers were fired because they were unionizing. They were a member of trade unions. So they are so irritated by the workers' mobilization for being organized in the trade union. Actually, in long term, they are both actually putting the future of the planet and the country they are going to live in to a darker world, actually. So today, yes, in order to protect their profit and maximize their profit, they try to prevent the most important constitutional rights right now, but they are actually putting the countries of course, to be stronger and if the trade unions are strong, and the future of the world will be brighter, I can say.
Çok teşekkürler Arzu Hanım. Iñigo, I would like to address the last question to you, since we are a little bit over time, but I don't want you to miss that one. So Rafael Castelo Congolos asks, sorry for my Spanish, although I live in Spain, how does capital become a means and cease to be an end in capitalist context?
I'd like to add a couple of questions. I agree with the women's movement, although it's a minority right now movement, because the cooperative world feels the same as a minority in the capital world. If we establish a parallel between the problems of the women to access work, we could find a very similar path to that of the companies accessing good legislation, because the whole system has been thought for capital corporations, actually. So there is a very good similarity here in feminism and minorities. And I acknowledge and I know that the trade unions have fought quite a lot, and many of the advances from that workers have today is thanks to the historic trade union fight. But I believe that we have to change the discourse. We cannot talk about fighting. We need to talk about cooperation between men and women, between different corporate or business models. And over these last months in the pandemic, I used to tell I used to hear lots of politicians talking about cooperatives, because they would say, we're working with this together. Solidarity is very important. We have to humanize the system. And all these terms refer to cooperatives. From Mondragon, we say humanity at work. That doesn't mean that you are less competitive. It means that it's just another way, another approach. So in the 21st century, there is no time for revolutions. Be a cooperativist is basically a way of standing in the world, and the best exercise for me, the best would be become partner of a cooperative and see that my vote and my opinion is exactly the same. It has the same weight of the person that is next to me, whether or not it's a woman, a man, regardless of their race, regardless of their sexual orientation. So if we look at the world like that, this is great. Nobody needs to explain to you how valuable the opinion of the others is. So I believe that something very important here is the financial discrimination. I don't know to what extent the racial or background discrimination is actually financial or economic discrimination. If people have means, discrimination is not so bad. And I believe that democracy in itself does not fix everything. We need to have the wealth needs to be distributed in a fair way. So we're not just, democracy is fine, it's absolutely necessary. And now, answering the question about the capital as a means, the last question that you mentioned, if we see the work as an end of social or inclusion, the inclusion of women, the exclusion of a number of races, then we understand that having dignified positions at work is an objective, because then people might integrate in society in a dignified way. So why is the capital a means and not an end? Because the capital needs to belong to the workers. That's the best way. It's like a family economy. In a family, where everyone share a house or some resources, we have exactly the same situation. And it's a simple recipe, but we need to be very coherent with that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iñigo. Muchas gracias. So I know it is amazing to listen to these wonderful speakers, but unfortunately, time flies very quickly and we have to close our panel. Sorry, it was my mistake. I just corrected it. So, but before concluded, I want to have your final remarks very quickly because we are already over time. But the common themes I hear from all of you is that the democratization will come through solidarity, cooperation, giving voice, acting together. I loved hearing these things. It is amazing because you all three mentioned them. Just very last 30 seconds final remarks, and then we will be closing the panel. Elizabeth?
There is a third value in the manifesto, and that's decarbonization. Climate is the biggest problem that humanity faces for the next, and
I am not sure, but can everyone hear Elizabeth? Arzu, Iñigo, can you? No, you can't. We cannot hear you. Okay, I was thinking maybe it was only me, but the problem is there again. So I will just go to Arzu, and then we will come back again, Elizabeth.
Of course, democratizing work declaration is extremely important, especially for labor movement, women movement, and ecology movements. All of them should consider these discussions. I would like to underline that. And lastly, I want to say that throughout the world and in our country too, everything is this neoliberal capitalist order is at its end, is going to an end. So in our world and in our country, this system has nothing to give to the young, to the youth, to the women, to the others. Can you hear me? Biz duyabiliyoruz Arzu Hanım'ı. Yine sorun bende. Okay, we can close. Okay, Miss Arzu, I am following you. Okay. The last thing I want to say that this system has nothing to give to the youth, to the women, to the working class, to the workers, to the whole folk of the world. It has nothing to promise to all of them. Their stars are falling off, the fairy tales are ending. There's no hard thing we can have because a new social order is needed. It is the word of the person and the need. So we are all trying to underline our work.
A different world is different, and we can achieve it through solidarity. Thanks a lot.
Iñigo, just for 20 seconds, if you want to add something, because we are in very short time here. Another panel is starting in 2 minutes.
Sorry, who is speaking because I cannot hear?
You just 20 seconds very quickly because we have another panel starting in 2 minutes.
Please, Elizabeth, if you want to add, I don't know if we can hear you, but if not, just from my side, thank you very much.
The opportunity. It's a very interesting subject. We could be here for hours. So it's important to have opportunities like these to be able to talk about it. I believe that the cooperatives build a better world, less inequalities. There is another way of making businesses, and that's my way.
Elizabeth, I think the problem is not solved, is it? Okay, so I'm closing this panel. Thank you so much, Arzu, Iñigo, Elizabeth. It was a true pleasure to be here with you. Thanks to everyone joining us from the whole world and our incredible team. So we couldn't make this global forum real without your support, efforts, and dedication. We have amazing panels following this one. So please just check the program and make your attend the sessions. And I hope to see you all later in the networking or in the other panels. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.